Hey everybody, welcome to the Deep Weeb podcast. This is where we have conversations about immersion-based learning, personal development, and a bunch of other Weeb stuff. So if you're new around here, please do like, subscribe, follow, join the Discord for reasons I'm about to cover in the announcements. So for the announcements, first off, we're playing bingo. Given that this is going to attract the boomer demographic, I thought I'd spice it up for our geriatric viewers by giving you your personally generated bingo card. So go ahead and check out the bingo cards over at the Deep Weeb Lounge Discord. There's a link there that you can generate it and play along. We're going to hit on some topics here. If you're present for 5 of the boxes with words and they're in a row, put bingo into the chat and you win. Make sure you post what space you're marking as it's happening in the show. That way we know that you were here for it. And if you get those 5 in a row, you guys know how to play bingo. Then if you win and you post your bingo card over to the Deep Weeb Lounge, whoever wins will receive 1 Twitch emote that they can pick for whatever they want, and we'll add it to Twitch, verifying that after the mods have verified it, and it's not something so offensive that it makes me cry. So as long as you guys know how to play bingo, no blackout, no 4 squares, nothing fancy, just good old-fashioned bingo. So go ahead and get that going while I am going through our other 2 announcements. So the next one is just a shout out to Daniel for the timestamps on the Doth episode. Thank you so much, Daniel. If you are on YouTube, then please do take note of the timestamps. You could be the one to add the timestamps for the next video. Appreciate it very much. I rely on the community for that. And if you do, you will get a shout out on the next episode. So speaking of an upcoming episode, not necessarily the next episode, but probably one pretty soon, we got an overwhelming number of questions. So thank you so much for that. The bad news is not all of these questions will be able to make it onto this show. We have limited hours. We don't want to break for like 12 bathroom breaks, which is what would have to happen if we were actually going through all of the questions that you guys asked. So instead, so the Doth asked about 3,000 questions in the Deep Weeb Lounge, and then Aiden also asked another 2,000 or so. So if we're going to fit all of those in, we figured we probably need a second part. Figured why not have the Doth come back on and ask those questions himself. So you'll have the Dekita, the Dekiru, and the Dekinai for Ham Slice, the Doth, and myself all on a stream, coming soon to a theater near you. So on to the main event. Today's guest has accumulated over 42,000 hours of active immersion across 12 plus years. Insane. So this is a breaking Deep Weeb exclusive origin story. We'll also have your questions, my questions. So thank you so much for joining me and my fellow Deep Weebs here, Mr. HMSLC. Yeah,
Hi,
so
thanks for having me.
let's go ahead and jump in first with a little bit deeper introduction. So I think our first interaction that I didn't recall this until actually really recently, and I think I only verified it like within this week, that our first interaction that I remember was on the interview that I was doing with the Korikata podcast, and the live chat was on the screen, and somebody in chat comes in and they say, "I'm gonna be a lawyer when I grow up in Japan." I said, "So whoa, that's ambitious," and I'm not. And then I think the first interaction after that was with you as the fan favorite moderator of the DJT Discord forum, where you are bowed to as Daio-sama. So the DJT, that's already a household name in the Deep Weeb Nation, thanks in some small part to what I've been calling my investigative journalism and reporting that's been going on since the Doth episode. So the DJT, as people are already familiar, commonly known as the villains of the Japanese learning community. And we have with us one of the top elites from the inner circle. The inner elites, they call themselves the quiz-pocalypse, where Mr. M. Slice Chaddington himself sits alongside his companions, Ouch, the king of DJT, and Mother Mary, Quizmaster. So are there any other accomplished quiz-pocalypse members that our viewers should be aware of?
Quiz-pocalypse? I think that's the first time I've heard that term.
Okay. So these high-level members of the DJT that are, controlling the Japanese learning community as a whole by leveling up in their quizzes?
I guess there's a lot. There's like, I don't know if you would say that he's controlling anything,
Okay.
but Aiden's pretty damn good. Skyman's pretty much like if you go on the server and you hit like if you tell the bot to like list off everybody that's in a certain rank, you can look at it.
And you would say that's pretty accurate to
but it
who is the invisible hand controlling the Japanese language learning community? Okay.
I guess.
Deep Weeb exclusive. You heard it here first. All right, so let's jump into some actual questions. Everybody knew what the first one would be, which is HMSLC. Good username or greatest username? What's the origin story on that one?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a very good username because
So I'll put you down for a good
some
username.
reason.
Okay.
At first, it started when I was in like grade 6 or 7, I think, in like elementary school. One of my friends just said like, "Sup home sliced me" one day, and I was like, "Okay, that's cool." But I was like 10 years old, and I didn't know that was lame as shit. So I made that my email address, right? But I just kept using email address. But since like home slice is kind of like dumb, I just started just using the initials for it, or like just the consonants.
Okay.
And then just using that for the past like 20 years. So there's not really any like special meaning to it. I actually like ham slice way better because like somebody like it's just like a community thing now. It's just better.
Our home
it's more
slice,
funny.
ham slice. All right, gotcha. So why don't we go ahead and get into your origin story? So like we already previewed, pretty big into Japan, Japanese culture. You've got quite an interesting origin story, it would seem. So fill us in. Where did it all begin in a young, not home slice, a ham slice life?
That's kind of a hard question because I didn't really like have that great of like a childhood. It wasn't that bad at first, but there was like obviously divorce. There's moving all over the place, and just my parents not being like necessarily on the point for a lot of things. But it just as I got older, it started disintegrating pretty badly. Like just alcoholism, drugs, mental health issues, and it came to a point where I was in like I guess I was in like the 9th grade, and just the amount of time that my dad wasn't there because I was living with him because he managed to get custody from my mom. But the amount of time that he wasn't there started increasing like significantly, and the time that he was there he was just drunk, and I had like no money, obviously, right? And we had like 7 cats because he adopted a cat and didn't get it fixed, and then the cat got pregnant, and then like, but obviously I can't do anything about it because I'm just a little kid, so like it came to a point where basically I didn't have any money for cat litter or anything, so the cats were just like using the same litter continuously, and everything was all dirty, and like there was a lot of times when there was just no like electricity, so I couldn't like do the laundry properly, or other times there was like the food that we had was really old, so I would get like sick, and like it was just really my life was just in a really bad state of like disarray. And actually, when I was cleaning out my things when I was coming back from Japan, I found a towel from that like era, and it stunk like a barn despite me cleaning it continuously for 50 so bad. And I was like, damn, I was going to high school smelling like this every day.
Wow.
But like it came to a point where like I wasn't really talking with anybody at the school, like in terms of other kids, and the teachers kind of like had given up on me, and I just every time like I would get called to the office, I would just like avoid them completely. I had just given up on everything. Like I don't know, like I'd never seen my parents succeed at anything ever. So it's like it just felt like, didn't matter what I did. So eventually it just kept going like that. And when I was 16, I left high school. And that was that pretty much. From that point until till the time I was about like 19, I guess, I didn't really do much. I worked at like a deli for a bit. I did some like newspaper deliveries, but for the most part, I just stayed at home with my mom, because my dad I can't remember what happened with him really. He just stopped coming around that much. So I just kind of went to live with my mom. And she has her own issues, like, you know, mental problems, medication, alcohol. You kind of get the picture, right? And it didn't really change or improve anything living with her either. But I had a place to stay, and I finally got access to like my own like computer, you know, and so I just stayed on the computer most of the time and just did nothing else. And I started playing like MMO RPGs, and I remember one day after like I was like 19 and a half. So this would be like 2000 and summer of 2009. I spent like 24 hours straight just grinding this one game. And I thought to myself, like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, it's not even fun. It doesn't give me any kind of like skill or anything. And like at that point, like the only image I had for my future was like being homeless, being in jail, or just like killing myself at some point. And I just thought like it can be anything at all, just anything. So I was also playing I started playing visual novels at that point, right? And I wanted to play like this one game called Mod Love, and the translation was not forthcoming. And I was like, you know what, fuck it. And that was in like October of 2009. And the first thing I started with was like I just downloaded a bunch of like texts from demonoid.com, and I started trying to use those like book learning, like with all the like the Romaji shit. And I tried grinding that for like 6 hours a day for like a couple of weeks, and it didn't get me anywhere. And then I just Googled around, and then I found the AJATT blog, right? And I started like considering doing that at around the end of 2009, so like December at some point. I can't remember if I actually started in December or if I started in January. Like that's where the beginning of the whole like actual real Japanese learning started for me. But I can't remember if it was 2009, 2010. So that's. But then from then on, I just spent like every waking day or every waking hour of every day just like learning and reading and just grinding it continuously for like the next 2 years. And like it really helped to build like confidence in me. So like after I did that, I didn't get my GED. It was like they have like this adult learning center here. So I did that.
Being in Canada, right?
And I completed all my credits. Canada, yeah, my hometown. And yeah, I finished all those in like a fairly short amount of time because I was used to just like grinding continuously. And then yeah, around that time also, I got into a fight with my mother, and it got physical. And like from my perspective, she was like the aggressor, but she was like, she was out of it. And then she left, and I got a phone call. Like, if you don't get out right now, I'm calling the police and I'm going to get you arrested. And I was like I was sober. I'd done nothing but study the whole time. Felt like ridiculous, but I had to get out. So I did. So my sister sets me up at her boyfriend's house, which is out in like the middle of the woods, like rural Canada. You can imagine if you go there, you're not leaving basically. So I get there. Turns out though that particular house had been raided by the RCMP previously, looking for drugs. That's a whole other mess. I'm not sure if I even want to talk about that. But I stayed there for a year, getting ready any future. So I was saving money to go to Japan. But of course, the guy was not paying his mortgage, so it got foreclosed on. Well, I was the only person in the house. So I was the one who got served the papers, so I had to leave, obviously, again. And of course, like no like family was like, they helped me, but like they only helped me within their limitations. Because if you go out of your way, putting yourself and your own life kind of in harm's way. But I was in such a bad situation that I don't think anybody could have done that without like, seriously risking their own well-being, I guess. So I had to find somewhere where to live, and that didn't go very well either. But I found a place to sublease for like 6 months, and like right as that ended, I just managed to barely get on a working holiday to Japan, and that's how that pretty much started.
Okay, wow. So quite an origin story of just getting to Japan. So how, you got a working holiday? Like what do you mean by that? Like you got
A working holiday, it's a type of it's like a type of visa. Like Americans don't get it because I guess their government is just like that. But like, Canadians, Europeans and stuff like that basically have access to like a 1 year or 1.5 year visa that lets you go to like countries that your nation
oh,
has
gotcha.
like a treaty with, that lets you like work, do what, and travel, and just kind of like enjoy the culture.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think
basically.
the most we can do in the States is like you get a 3-month tourist pass, so definitely not that long. Okay, so you got your working visa. You have now arrived into the motherland. What then?
Well, I had already actually started studying for university entrance exams at that point, because that's just the route that I thought was going to be the easiest.
Yeah.
So basically, I just found a job working at a bar, like an izakaya, really Japanese place, and I just worked there for a week, and I studied for like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 hours a day outside of that, and it was pretty brutal. And I managed to fail my first year trying to get into university, so that was fun.
So where were you living at that time?
I lived in Nishikawaguchi. I don't know if you know where that is. It's like it's
I don't.
it's in
Okay.
Saitama. It's like notorious for having like rough
Okay.
people live there.
I mean, I lived in Namagasaki, so that's also notorious for that. So
It was funny though, because I like, just from the people that my parents knew and the places that I had, ended up spending a lot of time as a kid, I didn't think it was like bad at all at first. Like I heard later that it was bad. But like, of course, they got like the prostitutes like from like weird Asian countries like around
yeah.
the station, and et cetera, and like, you know obviously guys who are like, yakuza running like brothels
Yep.
on the side, or there's like, Korean barbecue restaurants with nobody ever going in there. I actually went to eat at one of them one time. That was pretty fun, but I mean, it didn't seem that bad, but thinking back, it was pretty bad.
Okay. So you're trying to get into school at this point. And did you just like coming in on a working visa? How do you even find a place to live?
I just went to like
Okay.
a guest house.
So then from there, what happened?
Well, I stayed at that guest house until 2015.
Okay.
University. So I went to Japan in September of 2013, and after I failed entrance exams the first time, my visa ran out, of course, the following year in 2014 in September. So this is just after I got a perfect score on my N1, by the way, but I managed to get myself into a Japanese
Mhm.
language school
Gotcha.
so I could keep my
Okay.
visa, which was fun. It was quite an experience sitting there and doing nothing basically the whole
So
time.
you got into the language school. Is that at the same time that you were trying to get into university? How did those two match up?
Yeah, I needed to go into language school to extend my visa so that I could
Gotcha.
get into
Okay.
university,
And then
essentially.
from there, what were you studying in university?
I did a
Okay.
bachelor in laws, or a
Mhm.
bachelor's in law. I can't remember. Yeah, so
And-
that was fun, because normally, I guess, like in Canada or whatever, you'd start like with law school, right? You'd go do
mhm.
like an undergraduate first, and you could do like something in humanities, like you'd go like and study like philosophy or whatever. Um, But with the 4-year law degree that you start with in Japan, they kind of like just yeet you into fucking law courses like right off the start. And you start day one, it's like civil law 101. It's like, oh, okay. And the professor's like, okay. And then, well, I actually kind of liked it because they explain like the philosophy behind it and only the relevant parts as they go. I don't think it's as good as having like, but it wasn't that bad.
So getting into the school curriculum, was that, how long were you there for? Like, how did you finish that bachelor's?
Yeah. So in total, I was there for 5 years, but I finished all my courses in 4. I spent the 5th year there so that I could keep using their facilities, because they have my school has like a thing where if you complete all your graduation requirements, you can stay for another year and take extra courses and use the facilities for half the cost for that year. So I did that so that I could get into law school, because I had to take another year to do that because it was really hard.
So in total 5 years, what year does that bring us to then?
That already brings us to 2020,
okay, so
actually.
Pretty recent. Yeah.
There's a lot
Fill
that
us in.
happened
What happened
yeah.
between that?
Oh god, lots of stuff. Like I just kept working at the izakaya until like 2017, I think. And I started doing interpretation and translation after that, and just started like building up like a client base. That took a couple years, and then then I met a girl and she got pregnant while I was still in school, so that was fun. So yeah, I was doing like a study work father thing at the same time while I was trying to get into law school, and that was a nightmare.
Okay, so
then, of course,
was that,
COVID
what year was that happening in?
My son was born in like 2018.
Okay. You were still studying at that point. 2018 rolls around. I guess so how did, is this the girl that would become your wife? Who is this?
Yeah. Yeah, we got married.
So how'd you guys meet?
I was studying on the train on my way back from Barney's, New York, which is where I was doing interpreting at the time. And I was studying just like, okay, I think I was doing like civil law. I actually kind of specifically remembered I was doing some stuff about torts. And she just throws like a letter in my lap and then runs out of the train car.
Nice.
And just kind of leaving me there. And I was like, what? And I opened it, and of course the entire thing's in Japanese, right? Like, how did she know that I even knew Japanese? So I was afraid that she was going to be like a stalker or like a cultist or something, because that's one thing that cults like to do in Japan. Like they'll just like pounce on you, or like they'll like approach you suddenly. Yeah, so I was kind of worried about that, but she was genuine, I guess, turns out.
So and from there, the love letter, I guess, gave you some follow-up contact information. What happened from there?
It had her email address in it.
And then okay, so you mentioned you were worried about potentially being a cult. I know you mentioned to me things about the what is it, the happy cult, and that
happy science.
Can you fill in the Deep Weeb viewers on what exactly that is and what your relation to them was, or encounter with them was?
Okay. I was dating this one woman from like 2016 to 2017-ish.
Okay. So pre-wife.
Yeah. So, and she was a bit older than me, like 8 years older than me. She was kind of like almost like a sugar mama, but not quite. So like she paid for everything and was like, yeah, she really liked me, I guess. But I think at some point in 2017, she takes me to see this movie It's an anime
Mhm.
movie, right? And it's in like a cinema that I've never
Mhm.
heard of before, even though it's in like the heart of Tokyo. So we go in there and we watch. It's like the writing is really stilted. So I was like, okay, this kind of sucks or whatever. Weirder.
Mhm.
And it goes into like this weird storyline about reptilians and the reptilians taking over China and the protagonists having to work together with America to do away with the reptilian Chinese. And I was like, okay, this is oddly similar to a certain conspiracy theory. And I later found out that she was part of a cult that actually believes that's real. And it's called Happy Science. And I noticed afterwards that she had like one of the symbols from the movie on like a sticker above her door. And then in her house, you go in their house, and I noticed that I started looking around really closely, and like I noticed that she'd had like um picture frames that were turned
Mhm.
down, like facing downwards, so they were hidden when I was there. And those were pictures of, I guess, like the progenitor of of the religion, quote unquote. And apparently, it's generational. So her parents were scientists, and then she became a happy scientist. And I was like, I was freaked out because, like, I don't know, it's just really, really weird. Like reptilians, and not only that, but she was paying like a ton of money to them too.
That normally comes with the cult part.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah. So I don't know. I was kind of like pulling away a bit at that point. But then one day we're just eating like curry at like this really cheap ass place, like 800 yen for a curry or whatever. And she's like, "Do you want to get married?" And I'm like, um, and and I guess she got the message because she dropped it. But then, like, I guess a few months later, I just kind of like I could not do it, like, because like the reptilian thing was coming up in conversation more and more, and I just could not do it. So like one time she invited me over to Christmas, to her house at Christmas, and I just said, I'm sorry, I can't go, and that was it.
And that was it. Did she ever win her battle against the reptilians?
I don't know. I still have her online. I'm gonna
Okay.
ask. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna ask her. I don't want to. I don't want to do that.
Okay. So that what was it? Happy Day Cult? What was it called? Happy Scientist Cult.
Happy
Happy
science.
Scientist Cult. All right. They may still be battling the reptilians. Not sure yet. At some point you met your future wife, and at some point she also became pregnant. And so what from there?
Oh my god. Oh, okay. Um.
Also, some people are saying they
So
didn't
first of
realize it
all,
was so easy to get a wife in Japan. You just have to join a cult, apparently.
that's one way you
Yeah.
could do it. I guess. I think that would probably work because the cult. I've actually had a contact with another cult. I can't remember what. I think they're called Kenshokai. But like basically, the cults go for people who are
Okay.
like lonely or like isolated, and they'll give them like community and they'll bring them in. So they like to go after like
Right.
foreigners too. But the weak Japanese people, vulnerable Japanese people are
Hmm.
targets as well. So if you go in there, you probably will find someone, but they're going to take your money and they're going to take some of your freedom at the cost of potential bodily harm
Okay.
in some cases because they will stalk you.
So maybe not
Um,
the optimal route. Certainly a possible route, but maybe not the optimal route.
I think if you're one of the DJT boys, that might be the only way for you though. Just nobody else is going to listen to your insane conspiracy
There you go.
theories.
There you go, guys. We got the one option for you. Okay. So the girl gets pregnant. Um, you skip the cult. What from there?
Okay. So, obviously, you have to tell her parents,
Okay.
right? Not only do you have to tell them, but you have to get their permission. In her case, because her parents were like super ultra conservative, like to the degree that you probably wouldn't even see it on like TV and on Japanese TV or anything like that. Like it was kind of mind blowing to me. So I had to basically sit down with her dad one on one in like a booth with sake and sushi, and I had to like kind of introduce myself
Oh, that was the first time you
and
introduced yourself too,
explain.
huh? Okay, interesting first
Yeah.
impression. Yeah.
So like so like white guy, a little bit goofy, white guy, student, obviously bad. It was just like it was nerve wracking because there's no way that you can. I just could not read this guy's expressions at all.
Yeah.
Like I could not get any information out of it. Like normally, like just a normal like Tokyo person, I can easily like kind of at least get a direction that I should move in based on their reaction.
Hmm.
Yeah, that did not work. And yet, so it turns out that he had been like a detective for like 35 years. So like, so obviously he ran like checks on me too beforehand.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because my ex-wife had asked me at that point, like before we met him, to get like scans of my passport and stuff like that to give to him.
Normal, a normal request.
Oh, oh yeah. But anyways, I obviously checked to see if I was in the system, which I'm not.
You weren't even in the
Um,
system?
luckily, I was
Oh,
not in like I don't have any
gotcha.
like
Gotcha.
prior
Okay.
record or
Okay.
anything. But at least, thankfully, like I was going to like my university is pretty famous and like well regarded, so I didn't have to like worry
Mhm.
too much about it. Like, because the assumption would be like once that's done, you'll be able to get a good job, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera. So like I guess he was kind of like on the fence, but I told him honestly that I thought I could make it work, and I like laid out like the little plan that I had for the next couple of years, and he said okay. And that kind of like that gave me a lot more confidence in like talking to people who are older than me now, because like you know it just I did not think it was going to happen, and it happened, and it
Mhm.
worked, and he liked me. So
Yeah.
like just being forward, having a plan, etc., was a good learning experience. Yeah. So that was that little event. Yeah.
So then from there, you've you've gotten the approval, you got the plan, you just continued on through law school. Where'd you go from there?
Okay, so that was when I was in my third year. So I still had one more year
Okay.
until graduation. And that ended up taking another year after that. Because the thing is, when you have a kid,
Yeah.
you can't sleep, right? So my GPA took a bit of a dip. Um, I was having a lot of trouble finding time to
Yeah.
like study with all the work that I was doing with translation, because I really went on the grind there and talking to like people like graduates, or having like my senpai introduce me
Mhm.
to people, and it was just like a nightmare. Basically, I was getting like 3 hours of sleep. Um, so obviously, I didn't get into law school my first try, because that was actually really difficult, because like just the way that they grade it, the way that they grade your exams just makes it really difficult for somebody who has not a native who is not a native Japanese speaker to pass. Um,
What yeah, what
like every
specifically there?
single oh okay, so since I have um, a bachelor's degree in law, they have a shortened program where you write basically like a miniature bar exam as the entrance exam,
Mhm.
instead of doing like LSATs or anything like that. And they just pick like the people who are most likely to graduate, or not to graduate, but to pass the exam. So it's kind of like not even really fair, because they don't really plan on teaching you, right? They're just going to pick people who can do it and then just fucking eat them out into the world. But the way that it works basically is like this. As far as the my professors explained it to me when I was in undergrad, they have like a marking sheet. Okay, so like so they have the problem and they have a marking sheet, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to remember like you're supposed to remember like the laws that are relevant to it, how you interpret each of the individual elements that are in the law, and then like any court judgments, right? Any preceding cases, and then you're supposed to like evaluate the case that they give you. So like every single step of that has its own little like mark out of like 5, say. But each one of those is on like a curve almost. So like if you get, even if everybody gets like 5 out of 5, they'll start marking based on like who has the best like grammar or who picked up the elements in the most accurate way. So if you missed like kanji and everybody else got it, you're going to slightly move down a little bit. But that it builds up over the entirety of the questions, right? So like usually it's like between 5 and 7 hours for the entrance exams for that. So if you go through all of them as like a foreigner and you miss like one little thing on each one, just by that alone, even if all the other information is accurate, the odds of you getting in are just like way lower based on that alone. It took a lot of grinding and a lot of practice, and like it was just exhausting.
So you're grinding through this, and this is which exam is this for? This is to get into law school. Into law school.
Yeah.
And at what point do you take the exam to get into law school? Is that after you've already completed the bachelor's part of it, or am I mixing that up somehow? While you're still in
you
school,
do it while you're
so that
still
you can get
in
on
school.
to the next step, which is law school. Okay. So what happened from there?
Well, in 2020, I got into one based on my 2019 exams. I got into like 4, but I picked one and I paid my entrance fees and everything. And that's about the time that I entered into DJT Discord as well. Because I was like, I did it. Good. I'm gonna relax. Open up 4chan for the first time in like 5 years. Somebody posted a link and I was like, all right. Then COVID started. Yeah.
So from there, so you entered DJT. What about or I guess education-wise, you got in. How long did you study there for, or did you start?
Yeah, I started. I was there for like a year. But partially due to my wife, partially due to COVID, I had to quit after 1 year, and which is why I'm now back in Canada, and I'm gonna, try again.
So, I mean, we can go into this as much depth as you want, but what happened there that would force you to move from Japan back to Canada? What's the situation?
Okay, well, first of all, COVID, right? So I was doing translating, and it was fine at first because my classes went online.
Sure.
So I could, pretty flexibly continue translation. It was fine. Even going to school full time and studying 6 hours a day, which wasn't enough, but I could still do it. Like, keep up with classes like that. With doing that, I was still making like enough to support the 3 of us. But then around like October-ish, just my total income just tanked big time. Like, so it just went down massively, and I tried to get my wife to do like a part-time job, but she just refused. Like, she just wouldn't do it. So that kind of screwed me over. So I had to like really suffer throughout the latter half of that semester. And then I just went on like, what do you call it in English? I don't even know. I just went on break for a while, like half the tuition to keep myself in there, but things kept getting worse with the wife. So I ended up divorcing, but like the expense that arose from that kind of made me like run out of money. So I couldn't, renew my studentship there.
So the studentship you're talking about there, are you just talking about paying for like the law school classes, or
they let you like remain a student there if you pay half of the tuition.
Okay.
Even without going to classes. Like they'll put you on like break or whatever. I'm not sure. Just
Gotcha, okay.
Kyunaku. Like they'll just let you keep your seat there. But I couldn't do that, so I had to just, leave.
So so this whole time you were funding all of going to school and doing all of this on your own through just translation work? Is that where you kind of found yourself? Okay. And so I think that actually fits in pretty well with some of the questions that we have, which is, breaking into something like translation work. Did you like doing that? Was that a good use of your time? What were your thoughts on, having that essentially as your career for how long? For majority of your time in
Couple
Japan?
Of years now. Like what?
Is that?
Well, like half of the time, I guess.
Okay.
I don't like translation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's boring. It's good in that like you can be your own boss and you can do like a lot of like really, really flexible things with your life, like, go to law school while you're still working, et cetera, set your own hours or whatever. But aside from that, it's kind of like a pain because you can't really set like you quote unquote set your hours, but you also don't know if you're going to get suddenly like bum rushed with a bunch of shit, or if you're just going to get nothing for a month. You know what I mean? Usually I don't have months where I don't have anything, but like you can't foresee the flow. So it's really stressful when you have to study, because studying benefits from like having a schedule that's set, So it kind of screwed with my head a lot.
So what sort of like translation work were you doing? Was it for like corporations or what sort of thing?
Like corporations, law offices. I did some court stuff sometimes. Just like stuff that I could get from people who were in my like network mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So being like a bachelor in law, obviously all my senpai are the same, right? So that's pretty much the direction it went in. I did a lot of financial stuff too, but that was kind of where it stopped being really good for me in terms of income, because I don't know why, but like the financial jobs just took a massive dive right around that time for me.
So not something that you really enjoyed, but it was at least paying the bills for it. I guess as far as your Japanese ability throughout that time, I think you said pretty early on you passed the N1 with full scores. But by the time you started your translation work, like where did you feel like your Japanese was?
I didn't really think of Japanese ability at all. Like I wasn't conscious of it at that point, really. Like it was just something that I did. Like just speak, just write, take notes, write essays, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it was just kind of second nature. And it stayed that way until I came back into like the Japanese learning community.
So I guess first off, getting to that point where you're just doing everything in Japanese, literally all Japanese all the time. I'm assuming like were you doing any English stuff at all in that point in your life?
No, I didn't touch English again until I started doing the translation and interpretation stuff.
So getting to that point where you really are doing all Japanese all the time, like how long did it take for you to reach that point? Was there a conscious point where you realized I'm not in English anymore?
Yeah, day one, I guess, of AJAT.
So at what? Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
No, I wasn't gonna say much. Just saying, like, once you like remove all your native content and stuff, and like your friends from your life, it kind of just it kind of just stays that way and you slowly get more used to
Mhm.
it, you know? So like looking back, I can't really judge how used to being all in Japanese I was, because my entire like all my memories are based on my
Mhm.
understanding at that
Yep.
time. You know what I mean? So I didn't like, even by the time I got to Japan, I didn't feel like I was having that much trouble with anything. But there was some stuff that just did not really work. And I got back in university, some stuff didn't work or just wasn't anywhere near as good as a native was, etc. And then obviously the law school thing really showed me some of the things that I was
Hmm.
not really doing well.
So, was there any point where you felt like just started to forget English?
Yeah, yeah. About 2017, I guess, right before I started doing interpretation, I did a Skype call with my mom, and I realized that I just could not talk like at all.
Interesting.
Like I was talking in like broken sentences, and I had to like dig for the right word past the Japanese in my head. And right now, I don't think I'm even really talking at like a full like college level native English speaker right now. Like I think my vocabulary is just not there. Like I can do it when I'm writing,
Mhm.
obviously, because I have time to like go back and edit and et cetera, et cetera. But it just doesn't flow like I want it to right now, even after using it
Mhm.
every day. But like back then, it was just awful. Like I felt like I had fallen off my bike and hit my head or something. Like it just stopped as soon as I started talking in English.
So, at what point did that do you feel like you started to get that English ability back? Was that when you jumped on with the DJT bros there, or where?
No, because I started
The
doing
interpretation, right?
interpretation, right? So I got some English like novels and stuff, and I just read some of that. Um, I didn't do anything on the internet because I guess I didn't mention this, but in order to like keep myself off of like 4chan and English media, like when I started doing AJAT, I cut the internet cables to my computer and just locked myself in there with just like a massive hard drive full of visual novels, anime, drama, movies, etc. And I just did that all the time with no internet. I downloaded like we didn't have Yomi-chan, we had
Yep.
like Rikai-chan. Rikai-sama wasn't even out yet. We had Rikai-chan, and that's what I was using, plus like a physical dictionary. And I just did that all the time, and I kept that going through my undergrad time as well. Like I just had no, I had like recordings of my classes. I had music that I liked. I had DVDs, no internet. So that's why nobody knows who I am, because I didn't know anything either. I stayed clear of everything.
So you went into your own bubble, and what were you just executing AJAT to a T there, or what? Like,
At first I was, but after a while I kind of forgot about it
okay,
as like a thing. Like I didn't consider
right,
myself like an ajatter, quote unquote, because I didn't know a community like
sure.
existed really even. So I was just working toward like a personal goal, and I was enjoying the process of like just like learning and seeing myself get better, because I'd never really experienced that before. So it was really addictive to me. So I just kept doing that the whole time. And after I started my undergraduate degree, um, I didn't have time to think about
Mm.
that kind of thing. Like because I throughout like my 4 years, I did 160 credits. Um,
It's-
so
what is that?
to
40
keep
credits a
studying for
year?
all of that, I
Or
yes,
actually, it's more than that, isn't it? That's a lot of credits.
yeah, yeah. Usually there was like I think like a quarter of my classes were one 90-minute class for one credit, whereas the rest of them were like 90 minutes for two credits. So I was doing like, I don't know, not it wasn't that bad. It was the studying to
Mm.
keep up with everything that was bad. Like for example, my ethics professor would be like, he liked to do like novels, right? So he'd like just pick a novel and just like throw it at the students, basically, and be like, okay, next week analyze that shit. We're going to talk about it. So I'd have like a full novel to read, I would have like just tons of busy work continuously. Like Japanese universities kind of get like a bad rap sometimes for being like lax on its students, but I didn't really think that at all. Like if you're gonna actually try and keep like a good GPA, then you kind of got to do it.
So then from there, okay, so you're taking a ton of university classes. I guess you kind of left off in the story where getting back on with learning. Eventually, you plugged into the internet, right? And then what from there? Yeah.
After I plugged into the internet, I kind of just hung out on the DJT Discord server that Quizmaster runs, and I would just pop in there every once in a while and just bullshit about this or that. I was just like a normal like member there.
And then you rose up to moderator in that, and I think I even saw you say that was just because at that time it was the right thing you felt like to do, being part of it. But what was that experience like?
Oh, the moderator thing, yeah. So I think what was happening was the other moderators had left or whatever, or weren't active. So I just said that I would do it, and so I did.
So with such an interesting group of young gentlemen on that server, any particular favorite memories that you have over there with the DJT bros?
I think it's usually pretty fun there, just in general. It's kind of hard to pick out like a specific moment. I guess like it's fun being in there with like Quizmaster because he likes to share with his personal stuff sometimes because like his community and his pros, I guess. So like being there and egging him on so that he could ask out this one girl who might be interested in him, and that
same girl. Okay, gotcha. All right,
that was fun. Just little things like that.
Papa Jaundice says that your favorite memory was probably when Chicken was joining. That might be a Chicken alt.
I don't remember when Chicken joined.
I thought you were just gonna say you don't remember Chicken and completely deny him.
On my line, he'll call me, fucking yell at me probably.
So then some questions from the members. From Sava, what was it like having Quizmaster as a boss?
It's pretty much just the same as being a normal member. Like, there's like a mod channel or whatever, but like he doesn't treat like the moderation stuff any different than he does from anybody else, and doesn't like he won't like value a moderator's opinion over like a normal person's opinion. So it's pretty like equal like that. On the other hand, it's pretty like hands off. Like you can just tell like just being there, like there's not that much moderation. So it's kind of what to delete and what not to delete based on what he has done in the past to like keep the community the way he wants it. So like there's like unspoken rules like don't post scat or like that kind of thing.
Sava, difficult for some people to do apparently. So Swaggy's question was, do you have a hierarchy of Japanese ability in DJT?
I do not. It's too hard to like compare because so many people don't output at all, which is I guess kind of like you could call it good or bad if you want, it doesn't matter. But there's no real way to like compare them because you just don't have any information. You know what I mean? I guess Aiden's at the top, and I think the current like Dio members are like, I think that's a decent representation for who has the best general ability. But then you'll have like, if you go down to like N1, it's kind of like a really, everybody, like there's some really good people and there's some people who aren't that good, and it's really hard to like tell.
So you say some people are really good, some people aren't. What would make somebody like at that N1 level, like how would you get that but not be good? Like what do you mean by that?
Okay, well basically it's just like the quiz is just like a vocabulary quiz, right? So it doesn't actually test your understanding of the words, doesn't test whether or not you can use them like accurately, or if you understand like the connotations of them or anything like that. You can you can just pass it if you kind of have the words in Anki, or or you just grind it out.
Yeah. So no exact hierarchy. The actual system is probably somewhat representative to not being a complete noob versus having some experience, but like you said, below the N1, it might be a little dicey on how good they are. And are you meaning in like a rounded way? Is that, I'm not just BSing there, that's what you're saying, right? Like that kind of at those general levels, it's hard to tell if somebody's really actually good, where good would be somebody well-rounded in Japanese ability, not just at vocabulary, for instance.
Yeah. So like, for example, N1 might have some people who are really well-rounded, and it might have some people who are just really good at vocab. You can't tell. But if you go like below that, odds are like just like orange, blue, green levels, it's probably more like you probably shouldn't listen to them on how to like interpret specifically one passage of Japanese, and just like, but they will know how to study. So you can like, if you ask like a question about tools, or like, should I just read more or whatever, just sometimes some of them aren't as good. Then there's like fake greens who are just like really good, but just sitting there not taking ranks. It's kind of chaotic, actually. Like, it's hard to know who knows what they're talking about.
So, I mean, speaking of, DJT studying philosophies of learning Japanese, the mantra that we learned on the Doth episode, and the word that he left with us was read. Now, as I said, I've been doing some investigative journalism on the DJT, giving these reports out to you, the Deep Weeb Nation, right now. But going a layer beneath that read, it seems like there's a meta layer, which is this cope, sneed, and dilate part of this. Now, is that in addition to read? Because I've been reading the DJT thread for a while. I don't know that my Japanese is getting right. Am I missing something on what I'm supposed to be reading here?
Yeah, I'm not like 100% positive on what that really. I'm not sure they even have like a specific meaning. It's just like shit that you say to somebody who's like upset. You just throw it at them. I'm not sure that you should take that too seriously.
Okay. So the mantra should continue to be read, and it maybe don't pay as close of attention to some of the garbled nonsense that comes out.
Yeah. Don't dilate.
Whatever that means. Okay. So then jumping into some general questions about your journey with Japanese, I will just take a moment to say it's kind of interesting that you started off at this point of, okay, well, I'm going to just grind visual novels, going to learn Japanese, and then pretty soon after that, it sounds like, well, I don't know if soon is really the appropriate word, but at some point after that, it's just like, well, now I'm just living in Japan. This isn't Japanese learning. This is just living life. That's really interesting. I didn't have anything else to say there besides that's kind of cool. So for DJT's Wakazuki, he says, what does it look like for transitioning from input to actively using it for other serious purposes? So in your case, it sounds like translations, the law school. So do you have any sense of linguistic expectations from the other side? And everybody talks about how you may, how acquiring will make you understand. We got it. Everybody's got it. Now it's time to talk about how to output at a high level. So to Wakazuki's question, I think if we boiled that down, it'd be, what was that journey like of getting to a high output level where you could use that professionally?
A lot of trial and error, first of all, is like the key. Like with Japanese, I think that there's a lot of differences with English that you just can't really cover with input alone. So yeah, so like it's kind of, you don't really know necessarily what impression you're leaving on the person you're talking to, based on just the words that you're using. it's kind of hard to explain. Like you can pretty easily hurt somebody saying something that doesn't sound bad to you, even if you input. So it's kind of like a process of like actually talking to somebody, comparing the way that you're talking to the way that they're talking, and kind of like gauging their reaction, like their body language, just the way that they take it and respond to it. And you kind of have to just keep doing that like repetitively. There's not really a process that you can take that I'm aware of. Like you just have to do it, and you have to do it at a certain point. Like you can't prepare. Like input just doesn't really do it.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to the paid language learner course where they teach you what you were saying, how to eat dirt, essentially, because we kind of saw that as well with like pitch accent, right? Like it wasn't really on anybody's radar till some people, quite honestly, started selling it, whether through their brand or otherwise. What, at least in the language learning community, it seemed like. So was that also something that you weren't able to get from immersion alone? What was your experience like noticing pitch accent?
I didn't know about pitch accent until after I joined DJT.
Really? That's really interesting.
In 2020. But the interesting thing is that I had noticed the phenomenon of like the up and down. Like I could hear it even when I was talking. I would notice myself speaking wrong, like incorrectly on specific mora, so that I could correct it slightly. But I wasn't able to like constantly reproduce it correctly. So like it's kind of weird. Like some people say that you can't acquire pitch at all through input or just like in immersion, but I think that you can. I think that the problem is not that. It's that your brain doesn't necessarily categorize raises in like rising pitch with patterns in the words necessarily so much as it does with like, emphasizing some things, or like it might be connected to like your emotional state sometimes, or like even with like certain gestures that you make. Because if you like talk to somebody who's been in Japan for like 20 years, they'll say something with correct pitch, like maybe like 60% of the time, but then they'll like gesticulate and it'll be in the wrong pitch, almost like the way that they're moving and thinking, they're like tapping into their like native, like, I don't even know, like body space, or like just like the habit of everything, like the way that they breathe, aspiration, like everything. It just kind of screws up with your pitch a little bit. And one thing that I noticed that I do, for example, is like my dad used to like kind of stretch out his back and like say something and just be like, yeah, well, that's the way she goes, type of thing. And I noticed that I do that in Japanese too. I do that in Japanese, but when I do that, I flatten out pitch completely. So like, I think that the problem that a lot of people have with pitch is that not that they're not hearing it, or not that you can't necessarily pick it up. It's just that it's not associated properly with certain parts of the Japanese language, and like the association that you have with your native language stays like on top of it, so it feels like random, and then it gets mixed up with what you do acquire from the Japanese language. It's just like a huge mess. So I think that the point of like learning like pitch patterns and like pitch on specific words would be to teach your brain when pitch is relevant to what you're saying, and when like other parts of speech, like maybe you're stressing something, how that affects the rest of the word is different from pitch, air of perception. But it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily that you can't perceive pitch, because that just doesn't really fit with my experience at all.
So what other things would you say, so this is Thixis's question, what other things could you not get from immersion alone? So there's pitch, and you said, what was it, just being able to read people's emotions? Was that the right thing on that last?
I don't think I would say reading people's emotions. You read people's emotions to judge whether or not you're using the correct words while you're outputting. So like there's a thing, like you don't know necessarily how much information or what information people are getting from the words that you're using based on definitions, like it's just not how it works. But the problem is when you're inputting a lot, it's usually there's like the context is a lot different than what it would be when you're talking to somebody. So it's like, it's easy to say something that just doesn't get across to the other party, and they have to like ask you to expand, or they'll like correct you, or they'll like ask you to, or they'll say something, they'll ask you to confirm whether or not that's what you're saying. These aren't like necessarily parts of natural Japanese speech, but they'll ask you, you know, and it takes a long time to get to the point where you can accurately gauge what people are taking from what you're saying, despite what words you're using.
So what else would you say that you've noticed that maybe you weren't able to get through pure immersion alone?
Things like writing long form essays, stuff like that. It just doesn't seem to work very well.
So meaning simply reading a lot of books isn't going to make you a good writer.
Well, yeah, basically, yeah. And I mean, like, that's pretty obvious. Like, obviously people who read aren't like Shakespeare, or people who listen to music can't write music necessarily. You have to like specifically, like, you obviously need the input, but you also have to go through the process of like learning how to do that yourself. You know what I mean? And yeah, I guess if you're outputting from the beginning, you won't really notice it because it'll be growing as your understanding goes. But I went from no output to output, so I felt like that wall was pretty big.
So I mean, that's kind of interesting. You said you went from no output to output. So was there like the incubation period where you were just doing immersion and then suddenly you're outputting? So how long was that?
I did 2 years of just sheer input. And then I decided to branch out, and I would borrow like my sister's computer or the computer of the person who is renting me my apartment to like send out emails to like pen pals and stuff like that. And I would start doing like live shows on like FC2 or whatever. And that's how I started outputting. But the really interesting thing about outputting for the first time after 2 years was that I was able to, like, in my first email with this girl, my first pen pal was really long. It was like probably like 2,000 characters long, and it had like, you know, decent format. The problem is that the impression that I left on her was pretty negative in the end, despite the fact that I was accurately able to express myself. Like,
that's just an AJATTer thing, though, man.
Yeah. I don't know.
So you left a negative impression. What was that? Was that just because, again, you hadn't had enough experience like with the language, or what do you attribute that to?
I think it's both the content of what I was saying, but also how I was saying it. I didn't go back and read that email because it's too embarrassing even after all this time. But I know that I was using like, I was just, you know, mixing like literary terms with like casual terms, and like mixing up desu, masuke, and just like whatever, you know, typical stuff. But I think that the impression that I gave was pretty rough and pretty forward and pretty almost like not quite violent, but like I was explaining like the way that I had come to be in the situation that I was. And I think some of the anger that I showed in there wasn't necessarily like, it probably felt less like I was angry and more that I was projecting what happened to me out on the world and was mad at the world when I really wasn't. You know, like, it's kind of hard to, you know, bring that in and like, you know, be like specific in what way you're feeling specific emotions.
So Fiddy asks, are you talking about like it was just Japanese language ability that was the issue, or you were coming off rude?
I think being rude is lack of Japanese ability when you're talking about like just learners in general. Because like, even if you're really frank and casual in your native language, you can be frank and casual in Japanese, even if you're using like keigo. Like, it's not like there's a correct way to do it, that will leave the same or a similar impression on the person you're talking to. And the problem is that most people don't really feel that gap, and they just assume like, oh, my personality is different in XY language. And I don't really think that that's true. I think that there's just like, there's a gap between your abilities in the two languages.
So you mentioned you started doing some output by, was that streaming? Is that where you started streaming as well?
Yeah.
So what was that like?
It was fun. My only real issue with it, thinking back, is that it was it's one-sided, right? You're talking to a chat and not a person. And the people you're chatting with, well, I mean, you know what a stream chat is like, right? They're going to be shit posting. They're just having fun. You know, it's not like serious. So it helped me get confident and it helped me get used to outputting, but it didn't necessarily like mature my ability. Like, didn't give it nuance. You know what I mean? Didn't make it like a surgical instrument. It was just like smashing things with a baseball bat, essentially.
Yeah, I've noticed that in my own ability, it's one of those things. Like it can be, if you're not getting the feedback, then that improvement process can be slower. And yeah, maybe a stream feed, not probably going to be the ones that are going to be helping you chisel your skills to become the AJATT-Chad, or not AJATT-Chad, the Japanese Chad that you've become now. So I think you also mentioned that at one point you were like rated by, is that 2chan? Like what happened there?
They just kind of flooded my chat, and I think I was on StickCam at that time, which is like it was always minor, but like I would always have like, I don't know, maybe like 100 people watching, and it had like a thing on the side where you could like have like 8 people have their cameras pop up, and they just filled it up with like pictures of me, like like still shots of me, and they just would like draw on it with like MS Paint and like that kind of thing. Obviously I didn't care though, because like I don't know, like I don't think that kind of thing really affects Westerners as much as it would a Japanese person. And they got bored because I was laughing with them, I guess. So that only lasted like a day, but it was kind of fun.
So what else can you tell us about like your listeners there? And we can even go into other streamers that you were watching, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. My listeners were mostly like people I started Skyping with. They're mostly actually from like the northern area of Japan, so I started getting like this weird northern accent, which was kind of interesting, I guess. But they're mostly just really nice people. A couple of like housewives, I guess, and just people coming into like chat normally. People who liked cats, since I had a fuckload of cats. Yeah, that's pretty much it, I guess. There was one guy who was
the one's playing bingo with us right now. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I also had one guy who was you know how there's like every once in a while there's like a Japanese guy who's like really, like, oh, white guys take all the girls or whatever. So there's this one guy who was like that, but he had graduated from Tokyo University, and he was making like almost like 100K a year at that point. But he's like, oh, I'm bald, nobody's gonna like me. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? And at that point, I was still like, I think I was still working on getting my high school degree at that point. So I was like, dude, I'm like 22, I'm still working on this, and you're there doing that? You got to be kidding me, right? So I egged him on, and he's like, well, of course I would want to like date a white girl too. Like, who doesn't? And I was like, okay, like if they're in Japan, odds are they are okay with dating a Japanese dude. Why don't you just go and get one? Right? And he did the same. He went the same day, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go to a British bar. And apparently one of the British girls that was there took her boobs out, and it scared him. So he left. But like within a week though, he had a girlfriend who was from England, and they got married, and she was pregnant.
All within the week?
Then he left, and not within the week, but like he met her within the week, and over the next like 6 or 7 months, that evolution happened, and then I never saw him again. Kind of sad.
I mean, sounds like a success story to me.
Yeah.
So okay. So what about One of the topics here was other AJAT and learner streamers. Did you interact with them at all?
A bit.
What was that like?
I think there was like 10 or 12 people in total who are roughly as good as I was at that time. Some of them who were already moved to Japan. But the real funny thing is though is that they're not in the community anywhere. Like you can't find them. Like I remember all of them. There was quite a few of them, and they were all really good. And I just find it really interesting that they're not, like, nobody knows who they would be, because like you'd think they'd be like at roughly the same level that I am due to whatever experience they have, work experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But they're just gone. Nobody, like they're ghosts. So like I remember I talked to like Matt once in DMs. I was like, do you know of any like high level learners? And he's like, no, I don't think anybody really gets that level. I'm like, I don't know about that. Like it doesn't really like jive with what I saw, but like I've never found them again. So who knows?
Okay. Maybe this is too far, but could it be you get to a certain point, you go to Japan, you get into a cult, battle against the reptilians, they're just gone. Is there a connection there?
Maybe.
So with those people that are reaching a high level of fluency, I mean, at a certain point, they're probably just living, their best life in Japanese and no longer like kind of what you were saying, no longer really consider themselves like in some AJAT or Japanese language learning community. They're just out there doing their thing, right? Either that or the reptilians.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just thought it was interesting though, because like I peeked in because I was interested in like see what was going on. You know what I mean? It's just surprising that nobody's really showed up.
Once they left, yeah. So are there any of them you would want to reconnect with again? Do you have any names that other people might recognize if they were from that same period?
I don't remember. And actually I think I remember one guy who like was doing some kind of martial art, and he like moved to Japan before I did, and like went to one of the dojos and was there, and it was done, and he had a Facebook, but now the Facebook's gone. So I don't know. I think he was the one that I talked to the most, but also at the same time he was kind of a dick sometimes. So I'm like, whatever.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into some more of the community questions. So the 42,000 hours of active immersion, where did you get that number from?
Okay, that includes all of the time I spent like immersing before I went to Japan, which I think, hold on a second. I had it like on a note. I'm not even gonna look at it. I had it on a notepad file, but I'm not going to bother opening it. I spent like, for the most part, I spent like anywhere from like 10 to like 12 hours a day just reading every single day for the first 2 years.
And you didn't have anything else going on in your life then? Or were you still like going to high school? Like, how did you manage to fit 10 to 12 hours?
I didn't. That was all I was doing for a significant period. Then I think the third year when I finished up my high school and stuff like that, I was still doing several hours a day, and then I would go like 16 hours on the weekend. Then when I moved to Japan, obviously I was working. So it's kind of like a cheat number because I've counted the hours that I worked in there.
Sure.
Also including class hours. Like I have like an old schedule book where I would list time of days that I would do certain portions of studying for like which class. So I looked at that and I just kind of like guesstimated. I didn't count all of it, but I guesstimated the general time. So that's like, it was about, I don't know, between like classes and studying for those like 4 years, and then plus like the really hardcore self-study on the 5th year, that alone is like a massive portion of time, plus the 10 to 12 hours a day for the first couple of years, plus what I'm still doing now. Like I'll still get up at like 4 a.m. and I'll study like right up until like closer to noon, and then I'll work, and then I'll go back and I'll like, I'm doing like the book club in DJT now, so I'm doing that. It's just like a culmination of all of my like leisure activities plus work plus school plus normal studying, just like everything, except I decided not to include hours I spent with like friends or like dating in that, because just, you know, like going to school and going to work doesn't necessarily always imply that you're always talking. So I just decided to like include one and exclude the other.
That makes sense. So there was some stat tracking throughout. Anything else on that point?
Not really. It's just kind of like a really, really rough estimate.
So, and that is correct. That's over what? Over 12 years? Is that about right? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Were there any specific major milestones that you found in that? Did we already? I mean, we kind of already covered that, but what would be like as far as language abilities? Any that really stick out to you as major milestones?
Sure. Every milestone that I came across was the result of me trying to actively push it to the next level. So from input to output, from being in Canada to being in Japan and working, from working at a bar to working like, you know, professionally, making my own clients, stuff like that. But at the same time, also university, then from there to law school. Like each one of those represents like a new, like, I kind of want to say skill set even, because after you get past a certain point, it's not like fluency anymore. It's like a soft skill plus the ability to like execute it in X language. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to like differentiate between a skill and the linguistic ability after you get past a certain point. So I'm not really sure how to do that, but that's like general overview of where I think the milestones were.
So May Gon M from DJT says, bring up your old output blog, and his specific question seems to be your comment that girls are pretty tight. But I don't know if those two things are related though.
I don't recall making that statement, so I'll have to ask him about that later. My old blog was one that I started when I was doing my my streams, and basically what it was is just me doing output, but I deleted it, but I have like screenshots from the Wayback Machine for it, and it's pretty bad, to be honest with you. Like you can tell that I was only able to parse like halfway through a paragraph before different like sentence construct or whatever that just doesn't make sense in terms of flow, or like the nuance would be slightly off. But it was basically just me practicing like different types of using different types of sentences like in writing, essentially.
Good use of time, useful. Would you recommend people doing that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, no problem with it.
So then Magical Hour asks, so if you were to start over from scratch, how would you go about learning Japanese again?
I would do mostly the same thing, except I would not do RTK. I'd probably start with like a core deck instead, just because it seems to have like the same general effect of getting you over like the quote unquote wall of kanji, or the wall of kanji. I would do that, and I would just do everything else mostly the same. I made sentence cards, but I don't really think that they're that useful. So I might just do like 2,000-ish before I go to like full vocab card style. Obviously, the tools now are way different. I'd use obviously modern tools, but aside from that, like I don't think I made any big errors that I would want to correct. Probably just do the same thing.
Would you? I mean, do you think cutting the cord from the internet is still, was that something worthwhile? Like, would you do something like that again?
You mean like leaving the community, essentially? I think I would personally, but that's because I have like poor self-control when it comes to the internet. Like it's way better now, but I couldn't stop myself from like just going onto random websites and stuff like that. So if you can't, like, if you're going to specifically say something, I think that's fine. If you're going to like get updates on tools and stuff like that, and just like generally stay connected with like I guess like the latest learning like information, then that's probably really good, because obviously me learning about like pitch as like an independent thing in 2020 isn't
Yeah.
optimal.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or like not being able to include like audio on your cards for like 10 years or whatever. Obviously not optimal, right? But at the same time, like it's not going to work even if you don't have the new information. So it's kind of like, it kind of depends on what you are like. But I think on the whole, like if you can control yourself a bit, it's probably better to stay connected long term, because then you get there's just a lot of benefits to knowing people and being able to share and get new information.
Is that something you can talk a little bit more about, like just being part of a language learning community versus not? Like, it's staying off the grid, like those sorts of things. Is it worthwhile?
I would say on the whole, it's kind of not really worthwhile, just because, like I said, the tools, the information, you being able to like bounce your opinions off of other people is really important, I think. And it helps you get like a sharper image of your own ideas, so you're not like just randomly doing things, you know what I mean? Like with sentence cards, I knew that they didn't work, but I didn't realize that you can just like, just do like vocab cards, something like that. I was like, okay, well, sentence cards aren't really the thing, so might as well just like get rid of my decks. It's not helping me anymore.
So I think you also had a comment in here about like Patrick's opinion, and so I don't know.
Oh, right. The article.
So I'm not familiar with this.
Criticizing people.
I'm vaguely familiar with who Patrick is, but fill us in. What are you talking about here?
Okay, well, first of all, I don't really know Patrick. I just know that he had an article that he wrote in Japanese and in English, and he deleted that. But people still post like the Wayback Machine link to it. And I read it and I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty legit. But the more I spend like in the community, I'm like, I don't know if removing yourself completely from one is a good idea. What would be the summary of
like that, the contents of that article?
If I was to say it in like one word, I'd say it was saying, don't waste your time doing things in English, essentially. Like it's like the AJATT post, but I don't know, like the amount of time that I wasted doing things that I would not have wasted had I been connected is just kind of too great to agree with that entirely. Like you have to have like some kind of connection to it if you want to keep like getting like new books, podcasts, whatever. Like there's just a lot more available now than there was 10 years ago. And if you start now and you just decide to cut all contact with everything, 10 years from now, you're going to be surprised when you get back, because there's going to be a lot of stuff and it's not worth missing out on, in my opinion. So I guess my real opinion on that is learn self-control and a bit of discipline before you cut the cord.
So maybe you could talk a little bit more about what were some of the things that you felt like you missed out on there? Was it using sentence cards when you felt like you should have been using vocab cards? Is that right? And then any others?
I don't necessarily think that I should have been using vocab cards. Just that was an option. I never really considered it, because like the dogma of sentence cards teaching you grammar or whatever, or like collocations or whatever, it was really strong in my head. So it was like either you do them or you don't do them, and that's it. Would have been nice to have that option, maybe. Other things would have been just like I said, with the audio on your cards, maybe like, or like even Anki settings, because I just used the default the entire time, like literally just the default stuff. No add-ons, no nothing. Didn't even update my thing. I just kept using the old one. Because I didn't even know who Matt versus Japan was until 2020 either. You know.
Gotcha.
I started before he started, and I left before he started, and then just from there, it's just a blank. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know, like, what is it, Brit versus Japan or like Gary Ban or whatever. Like this is all like stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, my experience is kind of in some ways similar to what you're describing. Because I didn't really come onto the grid until probably early 2019, and before that, I was just in my textbook la la land with italki tutors and stuff, like grinding away at that for literally years. And because I didn't have people telling me, oh, you can get better faster than this or something like that, like not having those proper connections, I think really slowed me down quite a bit, quite honestly. So that's very interesting that in your case you actually managed to get, probably I would assume you're where you want to be as far as language ability. Is that a correct assumption? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I'm where I want to be, more or less. It would be nice, like, be able to output a little bit more automatically, because I find that now that I'm talking in English every day, I'm sort of like, it takes me a second to switch over, or if I try and talk without giving myself a second, then I just say something that's like weird, or like my accent will be slightly off. So I think that really going hardcore, like all Japanese, is like slightly better linguistically for your output than it would be otherwise. But at the same time, it's just kind of hard to do that.
So what else would you say at this point are things that you would like to improve in your Japanese ability? Is that the only one, or is there still like future kanken tests or something like that?
I don't really have any intention of taking kanken or anything like that. I might do it after I retire. But like in terms of like career, it's not going to get you any more money, right? So like it's not really like I can't prioritize it. So basically, I just want to do the bar exam in Japan, and then I want to come and I want to do it in Canada, or the solicitor's exam or whatever, the barrister's exam, and just get my credentials sorted out and do that. Obviously, that's connected to linguistic ability, but I mean, it's not, the be all end all of anything. It's more of like it's more like knowledge plus a skill.
Is that your goal overall? Is to, like, you said both in Japan and Canada, where would you like to practice law?
I don't know. I'm thinking in Japan, but like, I mean, I'll go where I make the most
Fair
money.
enough. So what, in your experience with law school, like, I imagine there's not a whole lot of Canadians running around the law school. Were you the unicorn there?
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. Any interesting experiences there, being probably pretty unique to the school?
I think for the most part, the professors were really good, and they all treated me the same as you would a Japanese student, especially considering that I was able to answer all the questions just fine. Well, not just the questions, but like the entire discussion, I was able to carry just fine. So there wasn't any specific need to like point it out. And I'm assuming that they did notice or think some things, but like it didn't really affect the way that they acted. So like they kept it inside if they thought anything, except for one professor. One dude did his master's at an American university, and he was doing like American constitutional law, because I was taking it because if you take credits in like common law, then you can count that towards like having a lower bar to entry on the Canadian exams later on, because they'll like go through your academic record and like, okay, you have the equivalent of this, that, so you only have to take X number of courses, etc. So I was taking that. But this dude, he did something that I think a lot of people who have tried outputting have run into sometimes, is that he just like found it just tickled him when I spoke in Japanese for some reason. You ever get that? Like you're talking normally, and like it's not necessarily, you're not even saying anything wrong, but it's just like, it's just amusing for some reason for the other person. Like it's like,
so okay, so you felt like it was just amusing to them. I don't know that I've gotten that before. I usually run into the, oh well, I'm also learning to speak English, and want to just switch over or something like that. I don't know that anybody's yeah, just been tickled pink by me. Yeah.
I get it sometimes, Kate. Oh yeah, there are people who are like that. So
Yeah.
if you want, I can tell you about a couple times where people have been tickled by my presence. First time was in Sendai because I applied for universities in Tohoku the first time around, and I was taking pictures of landscape, and I asked these guys at the Japanese if I could shoot a shot of their base. Obviously, I couldn't, but there was two guys. One of them was just like laughing at him, like he was just like he just enjoyed the fact that I was talking Japanese so much that he was giggling for some reason. Happened with police officers too one time, and then another time it happened when I was in university with this one guy who tried to be friends with me, but he tried to speak English, so I cut him out. Type of deal.
Yeah. So now that I think about it, I did run into a couple situations as well. Like I had, like I said, just like I had a one-on-one with a leader at the company that I was working with, and it was just like every time I would try to talk to him, he'd be like, okay, well, I want to practice some English, so we'll do that. But, you know, anytime somebody speaks to you and it spoke to me in English, it was always, I would respond back in Japanese, always, no matter what. There was one exception, but I can't talk about it. That's for another time. And then also just like going to like a store and like asking for stuff. I did get that every once in a while where be, oh, thank you for coming to Japan. Thank you for buying these goods. We appreciate. Oh, I'm such a big fan of Marvel movies, like stuff like that. Like it's like, okay, I mean, tall white American, I get it. So little things like that, yeah. So but overall, you'd say probably the majority of your time you're just treated like another student, right?
Yeah,
that was also my experience, I thought, as a worker overall. And then so back to talking about like university and law school. One of the questions from Aiden was when was that first inclination that you said, oh, gonna be a lawyer? That's it.
Wasn't like a really specific time. I just knew that I was interested in the subject, and I think that I would be able to, like, if you locked me in like a back room somewhere, just like grinding out contracts all day, I could probably do it like endlessly, right? So I figured that's good, and the more I do it, the more I like it. So that's just, it just seems to suit me, so I'm gonna do it. That's it.
And then Pazadora Boy asks, Gyakuten Saiban. Thoughts on that one? That's I'll be honest, that's my only experience with Japanese lawyers.
Okay. I played most of that series.
Okay.
I started playing that series right when I started studying. I played whatever was out at the time. Looking back though, the usage of like legal terminology and stuff like that just isn't accurate, and like the process that it shows is really not even close to the real deal at all. So it's distracting to me now, so I don't play them.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello. I actually, I'm not even gonna get into it. Okay. Yeah, those are all wrong.
All right, so if you're planning on practicing law, your textbook should not be the Gyakuten Saiban series. Gotcha. All right. So let's get into some specific Anki questions. So you already mentioned yourself as a user of Anki, that you are pretty loyal to the OG settings, no add-ons. But was it even necessary, do you think? Did it help?
See, that's a really tough one that I ask myself sometimes. I think that it does help, but I don't think it's like essential at all. And I think that if you just do Anki, like even if you mine and you just keep doing your reps, it doesn't even maintain your level. Like if you spend time away from the language and you keep doing your reps, you're going to keep getting worse regardless of those reps, basically. And doing the reps doesn't make you necessarily better, but it will make you, it'll make like the actual experience of actually inputting more pleasant, I think. And that's about it. I'm not like, I started doing Anki again for the first time after like 5 years of not doing it
recently.
And I'm enjoying it, but at the same time, I'm not doing it to improve. I'm just doing it because I like knowing new words. It's kind of fun, etc., etc. But I don't know. Like, if somebody asks me if they should do Anki, I tell them to do it, and I'll send them to Quizmaster's page or whatever, and they can set it up themselves, because that's what I did. So I know that if you use it, it works. Like, you will succeed. It's proven to do it. And there are people who have not used it and succeeded just fine. But I mean, like, I don't know how hard of a time you would have with certain things if you didn't do it, because it's not my experience. I'm just kind of dubious on the whole as to like it being like
Gotcha.
a necessity.
So over your time with the tool, did Oda asks, did you have any Anki special sauce, like any specific things that you did end up tweaking, or were you always just OG settings, and is that still where you're at with it?
Right now I'm using like whatever add-ons that I found that I thought would be interesting. Like I have the KanjiEater
Excellent choice
add-on for Kindle in there. Yeah. Just quality of life stuff, nothing important. One thing that I used to do was I used to like really delete a lot of cards, and obviously that's something that is recommended by a lot of people, but I would like consciously go through my cards and just find overlapping words. Like, so my sentences would keep getting longer and longer and longer as I got more advanced, but I'd keep just deleting. Like if there was any card that had a word that had words that were covered by other cards but no other new words, I would just delete it. So I got rid of like thousands and thousands of cards like that. So that's one thing that I did, is just try and keep it like trim, because I still ended up with like 18,000 cards by the time I deleted it, even after not mining for a couple years.
So 18,000 cards,
like,
you got pretty invested
like,
there, and then you just deleted it? Well, how did that happen?
Yeah. Well, it happened when I was in university. I think it was like 2017 maybe. I just, with all the like the essay writing and stuff like that, I started feeling like the stuff that was in my deck wasn't necessarily what I would be able to use in real life. And another thing I noticed that with Anki sentence cards, one thing that you sort of start wanting to do is sort of just like copy the exact, like the structure of whatever's on your card, but that results in really awkward output. You know what I mean? Like the way that a sentence is formed is like 90% dependent upon what comes before it and what comes after it. You know what I mean? But your brain like sort of like instantly kind of flips you into this mode where you can like shotgun out entire sentences and it feels like you're outputting, but really you're just copying the shit that's in your deck and like swapping out words, resulting in like really awkward stilted shit. So I could do that easily with the words and the things that were in my deck, but I was also starting to like come into my own with just like writing anything I wanted like instantly. But the thing is that I was able to use words that I never bothered mining, like almost instantaneously in essays in the correct context. But on the other hand, I was not able to necessarily use what was in my deck at all, but I was still repping like a massive like backlog of like, not backlog, but like just a massive database of like sentence cards that weren't helping me. So I was like, you know what, this just is not working properly. So I just got rid of it.
Interesting. So was that the right move, do you think?
Yeah. I wish I had it, but I don't wish I was repping it necessarily.
So then as far as, so this is something I'm still trying to figure out, which is, what does a healthy relationship with Anki look like when you're still in this phase of just trying to build up a thick passive vocabulary? Is it like 1 hour a day? Is it more than that? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I don't really remember exactly what happened with Anki and me in the first 2 years, like because I spent all the time in like basically the same room, right? So I had like I know like sometimes I would be doing like, I would have like 4 hours of reps going. Like I would do my reading in the morning, mine new shit, do all my reps for like 4 hours as I was watching anime at night, and just get that all done. But then other times, like I would have to, I can't remember like if this was like towards the end, it must have been towards the end, but I ran out of things that I could mine easily. So I'd have to like make like a minimum for myself where I'd go like look and read more and more and more, trying to find like a minimum of 20 cards. But at the same time, I also remember making an upper limit for myself, but I don't remember what order that all came in. But I think in general, if you're doing like if you're doing something like I did with like 4 hours of Anki reps, I think that must have been like right at the start. That's a waste of time. I think you should just chill it out. You don't have to mine everything that you see. You just don't, because it'll come up again. Everything comes up again. Everything.
So the philosophy. Yeah, go ahead.
I think like an upper limit would be like an hour. Like if you go in like an hour to clear out like a backlog, then that's not bad. But if you're doing like if it's affecting your life or your out or your input, then that's kind of not good.
So what about like prioritizing what words you're taking in? I mean, you just said not every one necessarily, not every word necessarily, but how do you make that distinction of what to add and what not?
Basically, I just went by feel. Like if I feel like it, I'll grab it. If I know it, but I think I might forget the reading, I might grab it. If I feel like it, I might not. I remember there was something in the notes about frequency lists. There's one way that you can use. That's one way to like decide what to mine and what not to mine. You can use it like either way. Like if something is high frequency, you might want to mine it because it's used a lot. Or you might do the opposite and not mine things that are high frequency because you'll see it enough times to not bother repping it and just mine hard things. You know what I mean? Like you can use it however you want. I think generally though, like the less tools and the less clutter, the better. Like just get to it. You start, then you feel, you like reflect on your own learning and you say, okay, maybe this would be good. And then you take a tool to solve something. You don't just grab tools and like, so like start, think, then maybe look at like frequency lists or like add-ons or like whatever other tools you might need.
If you're having trouble distinguishing what to add, that's the point where you should be turning to a frequency list. It shouldn't, maybe the idea being that it just like any other tool, you should take it when you need it. Gotcha. What about like card format evolution? You already talked about sentence cards, vocab cards. What else have you tried in that space?
I've tried MCDs, which were like Katsumoto's like massive, like, oh, grab like a paragraph or grab like a whole email and just yeet that shit into Anki and like use close deletions. So you have like 5 cards for the same like that one. I tried that. And I really, really don't like it for the same reason that I don't like that I don't like sentence cards, but I like MCDs even less because they're so big and you're repping the same like block of text like 3 or 4 times depending on how you have it set up. But the thing with paragraphs is that they're even more like variable than individual sentences are, right? So like in the same way that, well, like some sentences are going to be like more or less the same, but like paragraphs are going to be way more diverse than that, you know what I mean? So, and not only that, but like the rules that you use to like make a good paragraph depends even more on context, depends even more on what you're doing. So like grabbing like, so you need even more exposure to different paragraphs, you know what I mean? You need more exposure to a more like a bigger variety, but MCDs, you're getting more reps of the same thing. And it's supposed to teach you how to use like certain words within that paragraph, but like the amount of like effect that you would get from that is just so minuscule in my opinion that it's not worth really repping that. You're better off just grabbing like a book on writing an essay or something like that and just getting like a general idea for like of composition and then just using that. Like, somebody might come out and like criticize me for saying like, well, of course, if you have a book, you can just like, hobble together a paragraph. You have to do it naturally, but like you can't, you're not going to get with MCDs anyways, because just like a sentence, a paragraph is just one unit of a larger whole, right? You have to have the whole thing and it has to be like front to end. So you have to like you have to like learn it intentionally at a certain point. Like paragraphs or like essays is just something that isn't necessarily like a natural part of the language. It's something that we created to make it something like easy to get across, or like, like it's not natural. Like we made that. We made like novels and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to learn it to a certain extent, I think.
Interesting. So, and then what else? So you also mentioned in our notes like reviewing with no answers. What's that about?
All right. Yeah, that's something I tried to do when I was studying for entrance exams, and it's something that it doesn't really work that well. So basically, you're not testing yourself on anything. You're just using the algorithm to expose yourself repeatedly to certain concepts. And the reason that I did that was because the burden was so massive of trying to rep that much stuff with answers that I just started to just like look at the whole thing and just put the whole thing like on the front and just go with that. And it kind of works. Like it gives you enough knowledge to bullshit your way through like an essay and get maybe a B if you're lucky, but it's not like precise. It won't leave you like with like a precise understanding of anything. So I don't really like, yeah, because you're not testing anything, right? So like it kind of works to like kind of in some circumstances you might like use it, but I really don't think it's viable. Like I'm just saying that because somebody else might have tried that or might be considering.
Yeah,
me,
like I did that
kind of
for a while and realized that as soon as you're not actually testing it, it took me a long time to realize this, but as long as you're not testing it, it's not going to stick. And so I screwed up a lot of my Anki cards that way, doing something pretty similar. Because yeah, again, the key point is you have to be testing something, and with anything that you learn, there's a good book, Make It Stick, that covers that in depth if people are interested. So then what about different card formats? So you mentioned some other things about keeping different formats in different decks. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a pretty basic idea. Just like don't mix like sentence cards with vocab cards, et cetera, because I think that once you start doing your reps, you kind of get into like a certain mind space. So like, and if you have like it all mixed together, you kind of have like a split second between each rep where you kind of like stop and flip over to like, oh, okay, this is a a vocab card, so I'm just going to do the reading in the meeting, whatever. So I think that it's best to keep all your different formats in different decks and just do them one at a time.
Okay. Yeah, I typically do interleave it, but I hadn't honestly put that much thought into it. But what about like manually so applying Anki to what you're doing now? What does that look like for university study?
Oh yeah, okay. So for university studies, I didn't like when I first got in 2015. There wasn't really that much in the way of Japanese legal texts available digitally, and I didn't want to have to like type everything in manually into Anki to try and remember like definitions. So I would just make notes, and I would because I had already been doing Anki for so long that I pretty much had like the times, the spaces internalized. So I would have like a schedule book and my notes, and I would set the next time. Like I would calculate in my head how long I thought it would take for me to remember or to forget that particular part, and I would study it before then, and just like write that in my notes manually. And I'd have like a post-it note on the top of each like unit, I guess, and 5-6 reps or whatever, and just keep
so
like
manual
rotating them like that. And I would test myself. Yeah, basically, yeah. And I would block out parts with like a ruler. But now I managed to get my hands on like a massive like library of digital Japanese legal text. So I'm going back over that and just like copy and pasting some like definitions and stuff like that, because I couldn't bring all my notes over because it was so heavy. Like I had like 10 kilograms of notes. And
that's rough. Yeah.
It's fine though, because they're so old that I remember them all anyways, and they need fixing because I was so new to the field before that they're not all that well made. So I'm just going to redo it. Gotcha. That's what I'm going to spend part of this year on.
So maybe this is a little bit step back to what we were talking about before, being able to pick out what words you're adding. This was something Shoei asked to Doth that I'll bring up here also. Like mining, do you feel like you were mining at any point like useless words, or did everything end up finding a place, you think?
It depends on how you look at it. Like I just said like a few minutes ago, everything always comes up again. Like everything. I don't think there's any word that I've only seen once.
So in general, do you find that that's a better use of time? Like, I guess that goes back to where we were at before, which is how do you know which words to add? But is it?
Well, you don't. I think you should just delete the ones you don't like, keep the ones you like, and that's fine because it will come up again. But that said, you definitely can waste time in Anki. Some stuff just you're not ever going to get to the point where you can use it because there's not enough usage examples in the entire language. So I think that theoretically it's possible to have like a useless card, but there's no way of knowing what that is.
So let's go ahead and shift gears, maybe talking a little bit more about pitch. You already talked about, your initial encounter with it, not really like seeing it in the language, but then being more conscious of it after you see it in the language learning community. Do you feel like it's something worth language learners investing time into?
Sure, yeah. It changes the way that people perceive you quite a bit, I think. So I think that it's worth weighing if that's something that you worry about. But on the other hand, I don't think that it's something you need to get really stressed about because contrary to what I think, I'm not sure, I don't want to quote anybody, but I think that there's like a general idea that if you don't pay any attention to it, you're gonna get stuck into a state where you can't use it. And I don't think that's true at all. So I think if you're not worried about it, don't worry about it. Take care of it when you want to. Just keep your ears open. And if you know it's a thing, it's going to be easier to obtain it's going to be easier to acquire just because of that.
So did you ever dabble into shadowing at all?
Yeah. I don't really like shadowing that much, to be honest with you, because it takes a lot of energy. But I do shadow, I'll do shadowing for my old classes, like the ones that I have recorded. I'll just listen to it in shadow as I go. One thing I tried a lot when I was just starting out was shadowing while reading. There's the standard having a script or whatever, listening to an audiobook, but I kind of think that shadowing without any text is better because you pay more attention to the individual sounds that the person's making instead of the actual words. It's kind of similar to the subtitles. Is it reading or is it
very important question,
listening kind of thing? But
knowing. Which is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I also don't think it matters either, though.
Yep.
So recently, if you follow Matt on Twitter, he posted a study recently that suggested that when you're sub-vocalizing, your actual vocal cords are moving. So I think that's interesting too. But I think that kind of changes depending on how focused you are on the words that you're reading. But then it occurred to me when I was thinking about that question, I can't remember who asked it, but if reading anime subtitles or just movie subtitles is reading, are you doing something almost similar to shadowing? You know what I mean? I don't know. Obviously it's engaging multiple parts of your brain. I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. But if I had to pick one, I would say it's probably closer to reading, but it's also not listening. You are listening. You know what I mean? There's also different stages. You could be watching and not looking at the subtitles. You could just glance at them if you miss a word. There's no way to really quantify what people are doing when they have subtitles on anyway. So I don't think it's an important question necessarily. Well, it's important as a question, but I don't think it's you can't really make the distinctions. There's no way to really answer it anyways.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about habit building. It seems like you went from 10 to 12 hours of visual novels is pretty insane. I know you said you didn't have a lot going on, that was your thing at that time. And then moving into things that, transforming some of that discipline from learning Japanese into university study. What can you share with us there about, making the most efficient use of your time?
I'm not sure that I was efficient in my use of time
Mhm.
necessarily. Just I just know that if you have like a distraction, you should probably go as far as you can to get rid of
Yeah.
it, you know? I'm not really good at discipline. I'll just remove something entirely if I can't
Yeah.
handle it. But I guess I think one thing that's actually kind of related to that is how effective you think a certain thing is going to be at reaching a goal is going to like increase how well you focus on that thing. So if you know that reading something is going to get you where you want, then you're more likely to just follow through with
Mhm.
that. You know what I mean? Even if you have like I don't know, Discord open or like YouTube on or whatever, it's easier to focus if you have confidence that what you're doing is the right thing and that it's going to result in whatever. Like if it doesn't feel like a chore. So I think that it's really important to try and, number one, if you feel like doubt in the method that you're using, listen to yourself. Try and like vocalize it in your own head. Like try and like figure out what specific part of what you're doing is you feel is wrong, then try and like discuss that with somebody, like what I was talking about with being part of a community, a learning community. If you come onto like the Discord and you ask somebody, I think this, maybe this is the reason. Okay, maybe we can try that. This is more effective. Like if you believe and if you feel that that works, you're more likely to keep going and keep focusing. You know what I mean? Instead of just kind of like losing yourself in like uncertainty and then losing confidence and then burning out and doing nothing.
So this is a question from Oikawa's Slut. I believe they're a Haikyuu Dojinshi fan. How do you deal with lack of motivation?
I don't really have lack of motivation. I just kind of, I don't have motivation either necessarily. I just have like a goal and momentum. So I guess it's kind of just kept going for so long that now I just do it.
Yeah.
So I don't have like, it's not a motivation problem for me anymore. So I guess the takeaway is that if you try long enough, it does become a habit to keep working towards whatever you want. So have faith in yourself, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So I've kind of seen that as well with myself. Is like at first when you're starting something that's hard, it does feel like there's a little bit of motivation to establish the habit, and then once you have the environment and the habit and that sort of thing, it's not really a conscious activity, which makes it feel like there's not really motivation there. It's just you moving towards the goal. So that resonates with me too. And my experiences with all of this kind of habit building pieces of learning Japanese. So how about different mediums of Japanese? Is there a superior medium of Japanese for the language learner? Visual novels is a pretty heavily emphasized one over on DJT. Personally, I wish I could just read manga all day, and that would get me to very high levels of Japanese. I'm starting to believe that's not going to be the case, though. So, how do you go about that?
Well, I think that different mediums do have different like effects on the learner.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually interesting because just the other day, Harry, I think his name is the Australian guy who likes MMA, who did AJATT with YouTube or whatever. He's like, YouTube is best. Fuck anime. I kind of was watching that and I thought that was pretty interesting. He's kind of right because you can pick up like the body language aspect a little bit better and stuff like that. But I think that at the end of the day, it's not really super important. I think you have to do what you like because that helps you continue longer. So like if you take, for example, so take him for example, used YouTube, pretty natural, got like the gestures down, like the body language down a little bit better than an anime watcher, maybe a little bit more natural. But at the end, like if you take him and take somebody who's just using anime for the same period of time roughly, and then you put them both in an environment with normal Japanese people, I think in about 2 years, it would probably even out quite a bit, just because the the people, the interactions would really clear out a lot of habits that you might build up, or like assumptions even from anime, or like just in like what I was saying before, like if you use like really anime-ish phrase in your speech, the other person will react and you'll pick up on that reaction and then you'll fix it. And just like it's just part of the process. So I think like long term, like if you're thinking in the span of like a decade, it's not that big of a deal what you do, as long as you keep going and like think critically about how you're acting and, you know, your own like level. Like, so I think at the end of the day, it's not really that important. And the reason that people in DJT like VNs is because it has audio, it has text, it has like all of the different like, and also if you're not very good at understanding, it has music and pictures too. So it keeps your attention on it. And then that's what you want, right? So that's why they like that essentially. But I think the outcome long term is pretty much equal. But I think like in like 2-3 years, it'd probably be some pretty significant differences. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like just keep going.
Okay. That's just it. I don't know. Somebody from DJT or otherwise can correct me. I haven't seen anybody who's like, it's usually novels or VNs that I see people getting really into. It's never the manga stuff. So do you have anything, I don't know, did you ever get interested in manga, or was that always something
Yeah, I think I had like 20 gigs of manga downloaded.
Okay. Nice.
Like I just emptied out like Tokyo Toshokan, Torrents or whatever. I just grabbed everything that I could. And I read a lot. I didn't really mind it though, because I didn't have Share X and I couldn't like take snapshots because I was on like
very
Windows
handy
XP
today,
or whatever.
not so much back in the day, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So like sometimes if there's a word I really wanted, I would mine it, but otherwise I would just read it like normally, just for fun.
But it was probably supplemental to other things too. Like, did you get into novels very deeply while you were still learning? Okay.
Yeah. I think the first thing I actually read before I even started with visual novels was like Soseki novels, because it was on Aozora. And it was pretty hard, but at the same time, it's like it wasn't like that bad. Like I don't think there's any reason to like create barriers for yourself for like starting with novels or like night novels or whatever. You can just start right away with it, whatever you feel like.
I guess that would bring into question, I mean, how much white noising is appropriate at those early levels where you probably weren't understanding all of that, but getting into it, what was your experience with white noising?
White noising, I think I'm not even really sure what people are referring to when they say white noising anymore. Like to me, it's like a state of autopilot where your brain's not working. Because to me, the act of like reading something is like using the words or the circumstances around a specific sentence that you're trying to understand and using that like in context to like interpret. So like if you're in a state where like you don't really understand fully all the sentences that are in a paragraph, for example, but you can still take that information and try to deduce what is being said based on like the structure of the sentence and like the grammar and what you know about everything. I think that's fine because you're slowly building up that ability to interpret anyways. So I don't think not knowing what a word is or what everything is like 100% is important. And I don't think that's white noising at all. In fact, I think that the people who say white noising the most probably don't really understand everything that they're reading anyway. So like by their own definition, they'd be white noising. So like whatever, I don't know. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I just try, like put in like genuine effort, keep your mind working, and like be critical of your own like understanding.
Yeah. So I mean that's would be the next thing that I would ask there is because that is something that I mentioned this on Doths and plenty of other times that. A lot of times it's just a battle against concentration, right? Being able to focus and actually actively work on parsing those texts and not just, be thinking about some quick funny thing to say on DJT or something like that. So what's your experience been like trying to figure out how to build up concentration, like the ability to concentrate on these things? I know some people will recommend like meditation or things like that, but what's the ham slice special ham sauce?
I've meditated quite a bit in the past. Okay. I think it's good. I think it works pretty good, but it's a hard habit to maintain. And also when I was doing like VNs and stuff like that, in my first 2 years, I didn't focus like hard per
Okay.
se. I would just time box. So but I wouldn't necessarily set like a time for reading. I would read until I got tired. Then I would take a few minutes to do some reps. Then I'd close that down and I'd go back to reading, etc. Or if my eyes were tired from looking at the screen, I'd pick up like a physical book and I just, read that. Or I would just let because I was doing like the Autismo 24/7 audio
What's
thing,
that?
right?
I'm not familiar with that. I don't think. You just passive immersion or
What were you?
okay.
Yeah, just passive immersion 24/7. Or if I get I'd like get tired, I'd just close my eyes and listen to it as much as I could if I couldn't read anymore.
Gotcha.
Kind of thing.
Is that something that you found useful? Was having like all passive immersion on? Like, what was your experience with that?
I guess you know what I think. I think that it helps. I think that like having it on 24/7 really helps you internalize the sounds, but one, it doesn't improve comprehension, right?
Not
necessarily because you're just tuning in for like, I don't know, like split seconds here and there and like getting the sounds. And number two, now that we can put sound on our Anki cards, it's not really that important to have like contact with it 24/7 necessarily to get that same internalized effect of the sounds. So I'm not, if I was going to do Japanese again, I'd probably still do it because I know that it works and I just like getting rid of the uncertainty, number one. Number two, so I'd probably do it again, but I don't think it's necessary at all. And I'm not sure that given the current like technological tools that we have, I don't think that it's necessarily required for anything.
I found with my own experience that like I didn't want to do it for quite a while, and would rather do things like listening to audiobooks or something else, like because I have a career and I'd also like to learn how to do things better there passively. You know what I mean? Like when you're not necessarily focused. So I was using that as kind of my excuse for not diving in with like passive immersion. I will say I've been doing it though. Like I ended up just trying to cut out more English and just stick to passive immersion and that sort of thing because, as you said, like people say it works. So and I've noticed one thing that particularly like internal monologues, it's more likely that they are in Japanese when I have passive immersion going and that sort of thing because it just kind of puts you more in a zone. I would say that that's the biggest thing that I've noticed besides all those other points that you were also pointing out, just like picking up sentences and getting used to the language sounds more. So let's go ahead and move on to some more questions. All right, so we're getting into our some of our miscellaneous questions that came in near the end. So we already talked about the tips for focus, meditation. The Doth asks, what's your opinion on authority based on skill and gatekeeping? Particularly, that's something we see in the language learning community. It's in every community from the heavy metal music scene as well. It's someplace my wife said that she sees this sort of thing. So what would you say your thoughts and views are on various figures using, gatekeeping?
The kind of weird thing is that we do is like we gatekeep based on what we perceive as, or what like the general learning like community deems to be like skill, but like we don't necessarily know how good somebody is, especially if they've just been doing input for a couple of years. You know what I mean? And what tends to happen is it's less that one individual is like exercising authority and gatekeeping. It's like the community has a consensus that such and such person is good, therefore we will listen to their advice, and then they remove, like the community itself removes other people instead of that person doing it necessarily. So I don't necessarily know that that's like that good of a thing, because at the end of the day you have people who are less proficient making the decisions via consensus, But I think I think in general though, like I've been looking through like Refold and stuff like that, and like Quizmaster's thing and AJAT, blah 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 blah. I haven't really checked into what is it, Japanese from zero. I haven't looked into that very much, but I think generally, if you put in the hours, I think most stuff will get you from A to B. Like just based on my experience, like I just brute forced everything and it went okay. So I think generally speaking, it'll get you somewhere. You know what I mean? So it's not that big of a deal, but I don't think we're really gatekeeping based on skill.
Okay.
Necessarily.
So Castrated Custodian asks, do you think it's worth the extra effort to get to a native level in Japanese?
I guess, I don't know. Like, I know that, like, personally, you can tell that I'm not, like, native on, like, what I'm, like, talking specifically, because I have a lot of gestures that are just, like, distinctly Canadian still. So, like, if you're going to become, like, indistinguishable from, like, a Japanese person, it's not just necessarily the sounds that you're making. It's not necessarily, like, how perfect your grammar is. It's, like, the ideas behind the words that you're using. It's the place and the time that you're using certain words. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much that goes beyond what you would normally think of when you're saying you're learning a language. So I don't know if it would be, because I think that the amount of time that would compared to what it would be to be fluent, you know what I mean? Like to pass for like a Japanese person, even just speaking okay. Like, so for example, if like a foreign person comes into the DJT chat, but they don't say whether or not they're a Japanese person and they start talking in Japanese, even if it's like grammatically perfect, I can always point out the foreigner, always. So like to be quote unquote native level in Japanese, I think that the like just the cultural background part of it is really hard to overcome. And I'm not sure that would be worth it, because it'd be painful. Like I've had to go through like a process of like changing my own values, or like internalizing certain Japanese like moral principles as I've gone along, and it's been kind of like a painful process for some of it. Like I don't even have like a specific example off the top of my head. I'd have to think about it, but just I'm in like a weird position right now where I'm like I can't calm down or be like completely myself in either one. But if I come back to Canada, I feel like some of the parts that I like the person to be received here, because I'm too strict on some things, or like my perspective will be like partly Japanese. But if I'm going to Japan, I'll be too like Canadian for certain things, and it comes out like in the way I express myself. So it's kind of, I don't think that it's like even really a question of being like completely native level, because I think you'll always out yourself.
So even if it was possible, which it sounds like you're not even saying necessarily that it is, because it just would be too long of a ramp to get there and painful. Okay.
I think you can like affect a Japanese personality and pass as perfectly Japanese for like a small period of time, let's say. But like you'd have to like change who you are to a certain degree, because it's built into the language, like where you use certain phrases and why you use certain phrases, and how the other person can usually always tell what's behind your phrases or like your perspective. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of more nuanced than that, I think. Like if you're just talking about like pure like pronunciation, I say go for it, you know? But if you're talking about like all aspects, even the parts that connect personality, language, and culture into one, then that's going to be harder.
So let's move on to some content recommendations. So in general, let's first just talk about some content. So Saba asks, do you have any favorite books in particular that you liked?
I like a lot of stuff by Akutagawa Ryunosuke, but I don't know if I have like any specific like one book.
What sort of books? I'm unfamiliar with.
They're just like almost like absurdist type of stuff, but it's not like part of the absurdist movement or anything. It's just
okay.
Same type of, I'm not sure if I would say like the same type of family even as that, but it just has like a different kind of like skewed perspective that I liked. Of course, I haven't read anything by him in a couple of years, so I might have been way off in my understanding. I'm not sure. I have to go back. I also read a lot of like translated foreign, like English novels, like Hemingway or whatever else. Yeah.
Did you like those? Like, even though that they were translated, you felt like they were interested in the medium you were presented to them as in Japanese.
Yeah, I think that they were pretty good. One thing that I noticed that Japanese as a language is really good at is imitating like the tone of voice of the original author, even if like sometimes the words leave a different impression on you when you read them. I read like, for example, Lolita in Japanese, and that was pretty like the translator really was able to bring Humbert to life in Japanese, and I really appreciated that. So I think it's worth reading them. Sometimes the like the sentence structures and like the way that the paragraphs play out is like distinct from what you'd see in Japanese, but it's not really something that I worry about personally.
And then what about Century asks, what's the hardest thing that you think you've read in Japanese?
I read The Tale of Genji, part of it, in my first 2 years. It was like it had like the original and like the modern translation. I did not understand what's going on in there because I was too new, and I'd only read like modern novels until then. I didn't really take much away from that. I don't think I even mind anything. I tried. It's too hard. I could probably go back now and be fine with it, but I don't know. I'm just not really interested. Anymore.
Gotcha. Any other content in particular that's stuck out to you in your time with the Japanese language?
Not anything that really particularly stood out. I think I've been at it too long now, because it's just when I think back to like what I liked, there's so much noise in my head that I can't pick out like one thing anymore. But I liked the visual novels that I liked. Those were good. Those are pretty like exciting for me at the time, or like the novels, or like even what I'm reading with like the book club now. It's all fun. It's all good.
All right. So last couple questions here. So what's the best thing that's happened to you since you've been learning Japanese? That was from Arcana.
I don't know. Just everything, I guess.
Fair enough.
Like even now, like even divorcing and having to like leave school because of COVID and come back to Canada and wait a year before I can try going back. Like I'm not even really concerned about that, because just the amount of like skill I have in teaching myself things now is way different. So like even this situation isn't even bad. Like barely an inconvenience.
So simply being able to learn has made you more adaptable, and that's kind of what you've taken from all of this. So any accomplishments so far that you're particularly proud of throughout this?
Yeah, I was really happy about getting into law school. That was a big one for me. Hopefully I'll be going back. Like I said, I'm going to be trying for new year, but they also, like my old program also offered to let me back in. So we'll see what happens. I'll just try a bunch of different stuff. I'm really, really happy about that.
Would you say that's probably what you're looking forward to next as the most? Or are there other things in this journey that...
Yeah. I'm looking forward to going back to law school. That's going to be fun.
And so how long until you think that'll happen? Any ideas?
The next academic year that I'm going to be able to participate in will be like spring 2023.
2023. So I don't know that I understood this earlier. Was the reason you had to come back to Canada, like you just couldn't continue over there? Was that purely financial, or?
Okay, so what happened was my wife, okay? I was on a marriage visa, right?
Oh, okay.
And we've been arguing for a while because she refused to work, and working put us in a really tough spot. But she was still dissatisfied that I wasn't like buying her a new car and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, "Okay, look, you got to work," but it just wasn't happening. And she just kept getting more dissatisfied. And it came time for me to renew my visa, right? And she said, "Oh yeah, we'll do it. But we have to talk about finances first, or whatever." And she's basically trying to use that as a way to like leverage me into, and I wasn't playing ball, right? So it ended up coming right up to like the end, the final day, or the day before the final day of my period where I could stay, right? But she refused to sign it and kept like, just being stubborn, I guess. She did in the end, like, quote unquote, sign it for me. But when I took that paperwork to the Immigration Bureau, I looked at it and I realized that she had written my name, or her name, in my handwriting to make it look like I forged her signature on the last day of my residence, right? Because I just outright refused to play ball with her because she was being too like toxic and one-sided with everything. So what I did was I talked with the immigration officers, and they told me that what my options were, and I, like, just on the spot, just completely, like, I don't even know the English word anymore, but just like I just did it right there and then. I filled out a new application, a new like the new reasoning that I would need my thing, and I got I changed to like the 3-month waiver thing, I guess. Not waiver, the 3-month like tourist one, so that I could clean up all my stuff and leave, because I was having like a heart attack when I noticed what she had done. And it would be good for her to get me out, because then I wouldn't be able to participate in any kind of proceedings that she opens against me. Like, she'd be able to just go by herself and be like, "Okay, he abandoned us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." So I made it so I could stay an extra 3 months. We did a little, court battle thing, like just nothing serious, just like really, really brief divorce, and that was that.
Gotcha. So your option to get back into the country would just be as a student visa? Is that a thing for you? That's the plan from there? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So a little bit lighter question. Why chicken? That was Chicken's question. Why chicken?
Because chicken is cheaper and lower in fat than beef.
One of our greatest mysteries solved. All right. So from here, where can people find you on the internet, Mr. HMSLC?
I guess just on whatever Discord I'm in. Like, I'm in a lot of them. Like, I'm in the Refold one. I don't post there, but I'm in the Refold one. I'm in like the Japanese English exchange server. I'm in Moiway. I think Discord is probably the best way to get a hold of me, because I have the app open most of the time. Aside from that, you probably can't really get a hold of me because I don't really check my Twitter DMs or anything like that.
Okay.
I think that's
and
it.
And then
yeah.
you guys can find me in the usual places wherever you're seeing this: Twitter, YouTube. This will be up on YouTube whenever I'm able to upload it, hopefully within the next day or so. We also have a Discord for the Deep Weeb Lounge now. So if you want to stay up to date, that's where I've been posting stuff first. So news on the next interviews and what will happen with the podcast from here, look forward to it there. So in closing, what's one piece of advice you'd give someone on the path to learning a new skill?
Just start. I wouldn't worry too much about like making preparations, because preparations act as barriers too often, you know. So just get started, just get your hands moving, feet on the ground, do it, and worry about whatever adjustments or tools you need after.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like something just rolled in on chat. They're saying, please let Homeslice speak. They really want you to output something. Is that something you're comfortable doing right now, or do we need to save that for the next one? Yeah, what do you guys want? What do you guys want? You just say, just like, output. Just output.
Like,
we don't care what, just output.
Not even like...
There you go.
Baka.
Perfect.
I'm on the VC chat every once in a while now, so just come on.
So thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate your time and being able to talk to us about this. Really look forward to diving into some more questions with you guys at a future point, both you and the Doth. So we'll catch you guys on the next episode. See you guys. Bye.